Hello.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, I wasn't expecting you. That's great.
Right.
I hadn't looked, I hadn't checked. Can you hear us all right, Oscar? Okay, good.
Yes, yes. You didn't expect me, did you say?
No, but that's it's great that you're here.
I think I did confirm that I'll be coming. I have emailed
Yeah, no, I don't think you came up on the Eventbrite, so it doesn't matter. That's great. Okay, so there are technically a couple of people who've said they're coming who are not online yet, but there we go. Shall I make a start? So what I thought we'd do, is to just do a bit of a background. Hello, Zoe. Hi. We were just about to start, so I thought I'd do a little presentation of where we're at. Some of that is sort of coinciding with what's in the document, but with a little bit of background and just a little bit extra. And to then talk about where we go from here and why we think it's a good idea to do this in the first place. And David will then at some point feed in with some of the sort of cooperative BenCom ideas that are going alongside the idea of having a network in itself for energy generation and what that means then when the two are combined. Okay, so shall I do a screen share a minute and then we'll go from there. Just bear with me. And David,
yeah,
I have no screen share on my screen.
That's a little bit weird because you're down as co-host.
Oh, there it is. Sorry, there it is. There
Okay.
it is. It was hiding behind something.
Thank
Okay.
goodness. I hate glitches like that.
No, it was just it had an icon in front of it. Right.
We did try this
here we
last
go.
time, so good.
Can we see? For those who don't use Zoom all the time, you can move any bars that are in the way out the way. It's probably best to have the pictures on the right because of the way that the writing is going to be more on the left. Okay, so I'm afraid this particular Earth shot has the United States at its focus, in case somebody points this out. But there we go. So resilience hubs. I've just given that the title, Everyday Disruption and Recovery. I'll go into what that means in a minute. It's all about what the current and potential future capabilities of supportive buildings in our neighborhoods are. From there, I found myself in a meeting in 2019 talking about the very first meeting of discussing the application that Bristol City Council and Green Capital were wanting to put forward for the Climate Action Fund in, I'm pretty sure it's 2019. And we sat in a meeting and I put my hand up and I said, we also need to consider resilience in that because maybe the future isn't quite as bright as we think it might be. And we may have to sort of look at not just carbon reduction, but also how to protect ourselves from the impact of the things that we are no longer able to control as well as we might like to. So that's where the discussion about the climate emergency in relation to resilience started. And then, of course, after COVID, we then moved into, which showed us some very interesting things, which I'll go into in a minute, that we're now still in the middle of a cost of living crisis, which again has shown us that neighborhoods, distribution points, being able to look after people in different ways is important. And out of that have also come the welcoming spaces or warm hubs, depending on what you call them. And those are buildings that, or a lot of the buildings that are designated warm hubs at the moment, or the welcoming spaces, were already designated community spaces of safety, which is which are the emergency buildings that can be opened up if a localized emergency happens in Bristol. This is when I was managing Eastern Community Centre, it wasn't exactly a plan. It was a designation. It was something we knew. But as far as I was away for the 3 years I was there was never any particular, how shall we put it? I think one time we came close when there was a gas emergency, and one time when there was a bomb threat around the corner, to potentially having to make available the space for people from the neighbourhood to seek temporary shelter. But there was no other, I don't know what would have happened if it had been 1 o'clock in the morning, for example. Who would have been contacted by whom and how? No idea, because as far as I know, there wasn't any real plan behind it at that time. And Bristol is also aiming to become a resilient city, because in 2016 there was a big document, which, let me just try if I can click on this, what happens. So I will try and go back to the presentation. I just wanted to illustrate this. There's a whole big 68-page Arab consultancy written document, which goes into how Bristol is going to be a resilient city in all its aspects that are important to all of us within the next 50 years. Which is really good. It's a vision there for, how brilliant everything is going to be. Everything is healthy, everybody's great, everybody has all the things that they need, and everything is wonderful. Which isn't to say that we shouldn't aim for that, and you can slightly hear my slightly sort of, I wouldn't say sarcastic point, but it's not ideal. You can still see this, can't you? The blue planet, back at the blue planet, yeah. Yep. It's a very fancy, lovely document that has a lot of powerful words in it that are, how should I say it? I found it very difficult to find substance in it that makes any changes to our environment that make those happen, other than the plans that are already happening around it anyway. So the one city plan and all the things and all the strategy plans that we have. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that in terms of wanting to be a resilient city, the definition is probably slightly different to what we are talking about here. So building resilient neighborhoods in the face of direct and indirect consequences of the climate emergency requires a holistic approach that takes into account the social, economic, and developmental systems of a neighborhood, as well as the potential impact of climate change on those systems. That's a roundabout way of saying, yes, we want all the good things, but we're going to have to make sure that we protect the good things from the things that aren't so good, that are coming our way. So those could be floods in Bristol, bad weather in general that could impact. We've also seen that there's a potential, if there are certain types of escalations in the rest of the world, that we might yet again be looking at supply chain issues. We might be looking at difficulties in providing everybody with everything that they need in the same choice and plentiful manner that we can at the moment. So there are things that may not be as positive as they are now. Of course, it's not a popular view, because everything is going to be bright, as I said, and everything is going to be great. But the reports that are out there in terms of weather, the forecasts in terms of climate in Britain, the forecasts in terms of the insecurities that are happening on the planet, the impact of climate change on migration and supply chains in terms of food, water, all sorts of things that are going to be very much more difficult. So it's the challenge, and the challenge for resilience to be included is in addition to reducing all our carbon footprints. So it runs concurrently, but if you're just looking at reducing carbon footprints in buildings and neighborhoods, and finding a different way of doing things, you could, in theory, not look at resilience as such at all, and end up with something that could easily be undermined if those conditions aren't as favorable as they're now. I think is what I'm saying. So there are some questions that come out of that. Those are just really things to think about. So I'm thinking, what does that actually mean for our neighborhoods? What sort of things should we be looking at? So we're looking at energy, food, water, utilities in general, communications, having somewhere to go, shelter, all sorts of things that come into that. Our neighborhoods resilient already. Now, interestingly, one of the things that come out of that is that when I map the big anchor organizations in Bristol, for very good reasons, those tend to be in the neighborhoods with the greatest needs. Whereas in the more wealthy parts of our city, we have often more sort of halls for hire that are not always manned, that are used for events, but don't necessarily have the same walk in, be in, permanent occupancy, reception space, places where people can go in the same manner. Now, the warm hubs have changed that a bit across, because they were across the city, much more spread out. But obviously that's a lot of that is coming to a stop slowly now. So that's one. So are they resilient? It's a question. I think a lot of our warm hubs and a lot of the centres that we have at physical spaces aren't resilient, in the sense that they probably wouldn't be able to function very well if there was a real sort of emergency impact of some sort. And it would be quite hard to make that work without having pre-planned ideas about how to respond. And this is obviously, this is, by the way, in terms of Donna being on the line here in particular, this does not mean that statutory organisations don't have plans. Of course they do. There's lots of things that kick into place, I'm sure, if there was an actual emergency. But those are, from where I'm sitting, about making the basic functions of life work. This is one step up from that. This is, can we still enable people to do some of the things they need to do? Can we make sure that we assist in that? Can we make sure that we use the resources we have locally in the best way possible, that are beyond what the council or the NHS or the police can do? Or so it's assisting on top of that. So at the moment, that takes us to the fact that buildings and neighborhoods function very well on a day-to-day basis. They can do all sorts of things. They can deal with people with poverty, with food banks, with delivery of things that are happening every day that are great. There obviously is always room for improvement. There's always more money needed, always more resources needed. But principally, they function on an everyday basis, and they do. And the anchor organizations in particular, the bigger ones are open daily or almost daily. They have staff, they have support, they have plans, they have business plans, they have funding, all sorts of things that happen continuously. However, in the case of disruption, COVID was one thing, because obviously that meant that spaces had to be used in a very different way for a very long time. And very quickly people found ways around that. But with the recent crisis of living costs, sorry, it's slightly different, because while it enabled places to widen their availability in a way, so it allowed people to come to spaces when they probably wouldn't necessarily have been open or available in that way, to be used in that way, and that they were or are in part still. But that's very minor disruption. That's not disruption to essential things like power. It's not disruption in the sense of parts of the city having difficulty with supply of any kind. Communication is still up, so all the basic functions are still in place. So while there is some element of reacting to a new thing that could be called disruptive, so people suddenly having no money is a disruption, but it's a different kind of disruption that could be absorbed into the everyday much more easily. And then at the end, and at the end of that, if you did have an emergency situation after, I don't know, a storm or something sustained that wouldn't allow us to have all the things that we would need to function on an everyday basis for a sustained period of time. And when I say sustained, I still mean days as opposed to the apocalypse. We are talking short-term measures, short-term bridging of facilities we should have continuously, but may not have continuously at some point. And then having within that the recovery process of that, and working with lots of other agencies to make that happen, be that locally or across the whole city, or more than that for that matter. So the point of setting up a resilience network of resilience hubs would be to have community buildings have become designated resilience hubs. So we'll just, so obviously they keep their original identities. This is not about changing names or anything like that. It's more of an additional little banner that you get as a resilience hub so that it would be a recognizable tick, if you want to call it that. And any organizations that have buildings that are interested would become members of the CIC in order to be able to be part of the taking into account of resilience. There's the whole point of building a partnership network, because it is about connecting the neighborhoods with the resilience that is being built in all of the other agencies, which we'll come to in a minute, that should be partnership, should be partners in this. And then we have communication channels in terms of websites and social media and open source resources that we would want to share, so that not every organization, every building, every interested party has to start from scratch again, because that would be pointless. This is about working together, sharing, and especially when people are looking at making their buildings carbon neutral, looking at how to change the fabrics of their building to a more carbon neutral way of functioning. And the investment that needs to, and so a different way of looking at that the resilience part of that is protecting that investment, making sure that that has longevity and doesn't, at the first hurdle of a storm in Bristol, stop functioning. That will be a really lost opportunity in a way. And in order to allow this work to sort of coincide, we want to encourage that part of it, because it's about energy distribution, it's about fairness, it's about making sure that new ways of producing energy can, on the one hand, produce a pot of money that can then go back to those communities to be used as part of the resilience and climate agenda, but also in order to allow for the resilience to be built into the energy network that we are proposing to build on the back of this, which would be the second part of the organizational build that we're looking at. So on the one hand, it's a community interest company, which would simply be about the sort of partnership, working together, sharing information side of things, and enabling organizations individually to take resilience into account. And then secondary to that is, secondary as in parallel, I should say, is the energy production and the surplus fund distribution that comes out of that, which is going to be probably largely solar based, but there are other renewable energies that can be looked into to make that happen. And in that, resilience will be really important in terms of distribution of energy and to build those two together. And then next is, there's also the question of some commercial buildings. So there might be places like hotels, big office blocks with big lobbies, that it might be in their interest to be part of this in a different way, but still be sort of bringing together the private and the community to see if there's synergy in that to interlink the whole city, essentially. And then there's a question of our partners, which again, I will go back to in a minute in more detail. And then to have some plans in place to look at the distribution, to look at the build, to have plans in place that allow for a resilience hub to look at as disruption and recovery as the focal points, and then by 2025 to actually have that in place for a couple of buildings or 3 buildings to show that it works, but at the same time to bring on other ones in the background to go through similar processes. So actually have some work done. And then of course to continue to support continuously make this go. So it's a long-term project. This is not a couple of years to just do that and then that's that. It needs to be continuously looked at, and it will be also in view of how climate change will affect us in the real world. We will know, the further we move into the future, the more we'll know about that. I know that's a bit obvious, but it's essentially like that. And so from a buildings perspective or from an organizational perspective, you become a member, you have a plan for your building, which is about the building and the community surrounding it. It's working together. It's about using the tools that are already very much in use for the Climate Action Fund projects that are being supported to tap into the same kind of engagement to make sure that it's local, and then the implementation of the resilient hubs plans will be over time so that each building then can do that for themselves. But then it's also about, once that's done, it's not done, and then it goes on a shelf. Then it's about making sure that the network does testing of what it can do, make sure that that the resources remain up to date, that it's an ongoing process. It doesn't stop there. So at the moment we have interest from St. Werburgh's, and Gosca made it. We've got Eastside Community Centre who can't, Eastside Community, Iris, it's Trust, not Centre. I'm mixing my terms here. It's Eastside Community Trust, I shall change that. Then we have Briggs, which is St. Anne's House. We have Philwood Community Centre and Norwest Media Centre. Those are the ones that have essentially firmly shown their interest. I haven't even asked everybody yet. And a couple of them have said they're going to put it. So I know that most likely who couldn't be here today, and it's a long story, but Southmead are likely to also want to be part of this as well. Now, if you look at the distribution of that in terms of what populations those organizations cover, it's a very big part. Sorry, I'm also talking to Lochleys, to the community. What's they called? Lochleys is called. Somebody help me.
Love solar.
Look, please.
Look, please love solar.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's yes.
Lockleys
There are lots
Neighbourhood
of-
Trust.
Neighbourhood Trust, that's the one. So nobody said no, it's just a few of them have had other priorities to not be able to make the meeting. But even just those, if you look at those now, it's a huge number of people that they cover. It's thousands and thousands of people in Bristol that are covered just by those geographical areas that those organisations serve in what they do. So it's really positive from my point of view. And then what's even more positive is that David and I have had conversations with lots of the potential partners. So Donna is somewhere here on the call, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Donna, that you deal with the with the community spaces of safety, the emergency response of the council, and those kind of things. Anyway, there is the Bristol Energy Co-op has shown a principal interest in seeing how we might be able to work with them in principle. We'll see how that works. So this is all about working together rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. We've also we're very much in touch with Bristol Energy Network. They have also got another meeting this morning with WECA, so it's just ridiculous. Otherwise, they would have been on the call as well. Bristol Green Capital through the Climate Action Fund team. There's been lots of conversations going on. I have not spoken to the Bristol Disability Equalities Forum, but they are part of the Climate Action Fund team anyway. So I'm hoping to have a conversation with them. Bristol Water, I haven't got in touch with them yet. However, I'm pretty sure that they will be interested too. We have been talking to City Leap. They are very interested because they're also seeing the protection of assets as one of the things they're interested in, and to look at how that might work with what they want to achieve. I'm hoping National Grid will be interested. We will find out. And energy companies are definitely interested. And what isn't, sorry, just bear with me a second. What isn't on here is insurance companies, because they are interested in this. I know that Aviva has been quite active in supporting anything to do with emergency responses and that kind of thing. And then we're also thinking, like I said earlier, in terms of large supermarkets might be interested, because again, I guess the crisis through COVID has shown them that they can play a central part in a lot of things, and they might be more responsive to looking ahead to certain things now. Again, I think that there are lots of plans out there that other statutory organisations have that are involving quite a lot of this anyway, but possibly in a slightly different way. When we're looking at the registration of the community interest company, we need a statement of intent. Now, this is really long. I can read it out, but what it is essentially, it just states what we want to do. It's about, and I will make this available so that people can have a look at it rather than read it out. But it just says, this is what the CIC will be doing, which is support organisations and each other and make sure that it's a supportive network of organisations.
Iris, when you say it's been brought in, who's it been brought in by?
Brought it into being by me. I'm wanting to register. Sorry. Yeah, it's been brought into being, so I'm just about to register it. I need to be very quick off the mark because there's thousands of people out there who are having similar ideas. So I'm hoping to get on with that. What I might have to do in the interest of time is, because at the moment, Resilience Network CIC is still available as a name. I was going to ask this meeting if I should just go. I think what I would like to do is just go ahead and secure that, and then make amendments to directors and, if necessary, articles, and just use standard ones to get the registration done. First of all, which is 27 quid or something, and just do that so that that bit is done.
Iris, if you called it the Bristol Resilience Network, would that reduce the number of people wanting that name?
I don't know. I thought if we called it the Resilience Network for now, the reason the reason why I don't want to call it Bristol is because some people who live on the outskirts of Bristol get quite tetchy about it. And I'd like it to be able to spread out, at least notionally, with the outside of Bristol as well. We're not necessarily talking the whole country, but certainly, you know, some people who are in South Gloucester get very uptight about being called Bristol.
Right. Okay. Understand.
So
Avon then? Avon Resilience Network?
Definitely not.
Right.
So this is a very poignant because yes, so the name of it is, but again, names can be changed. It's not set in stone.
Yep.
It's very simple as long as the name isn't in use and you have reason to change. It's not a problem to change the name of the organization you have chosen. We also need to have a think about who should be the board members of that. Now, because it's a CIC, it's different to a charity, which means that the people who are actively working in it can be on the board, which is different. And it's also about, you know, getting an organization ready to take on funding obligations. So which means, you know, bank accounts and policies and procedures and potentially being able to employ somebody, that kind of thing. But that takes time. So first of all, you have to have the organization in place with some people who want to be board members, and then you need to be able to do all the rest. And you can't apply for most funding unless you're going via a different third-party organization. You need to have your organization in place, you need to have your bank account in place, and you need to be eligible with the terms of that particular fund. So even seed funding is difficult to get one you haven't got anything. But that's it. So I'm hoping somebody will have some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. Hello. Hello, Michaela. So what do we think? Yes, Donna? Hi.
Before I go over what we've already got and what we're already doing, can I just ask where everyone, I don't know everybody, sorry. So can we just do a few introductions?
Of course.
And then I'll go into my blah.
I don't know if everybody has got people in the same order, but Tim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm treasurer of Philwood Community Centre, Community in Partnership, Knoll West.
And you and that's in charge of Philwood Community Centre in particular, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Zoe?
Hey everyone, I'm Zoe. I'm climate action researcher at Watershed.
Who wants to be next? Anna? I'm going according to who's on my screen next.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm working at Bristol in an ops and business role. I'm also a master's student at UE, so studying sustainable development.
And Bricks is St Anne's House in particular,
right,
which is in St Anne's, down the road from the Netham.
That's right. Yeah, quite close to the river.
Yeah. David?
Yeah, I'm not associated with any of the hubs right now, though I was involved a lot with Hamilton House and putting solar in there. And I've been sort of think tanking renewable energy for the last few years.
Michaela?
Hi there, I'm the Buildings and Operations Manager at Norwest Media Centre.
Cool. And Rosanna?
Hi, I have two hats. My one hat is co-director of Bristol Energy Network. And so I'm kind of representing.
Oh, you are? Ah, yay. Somebody made it. Because everybody else was at the other meeting.
Yeah, but it's really unfortunate because I'm running supposedly in a different meeting right now. So I just decided I'll come and say hello and say, actually, we're really wanting to be part of it, but I can't. I've said that I'll be 15 minutes before I join the next one. And my other hat is I work at the University of Bristol, and I was thinking actually this is the idea that we as a university could also be interested in participating, because I've got so many premises in so many different parts of the city that, you know, I haven't actually taken this. It just occurred to me now.
And in the affluent parts of the city where we don't have anchor organizations, yes.
Yeah. So well, yeah, definitely something that we can put forward to the university at different levels and see what they would say. But you know, given that it is also distributed, so we have Clifton Park, we have our veterinary school is outside of the city in Longton or long something.
Langford.
That's
yes.
There is a campus, and then a new campus is going to be in Bristol Meads, next to Bristol Meads. So there is
Temple Meads,
Temple Meads. Sorry,
yeah. Excellent. That's a really absolutely. Goska?
I'm Goska. I'm from St. Werbeck's Community Centre. Interested in the Resilience Hub. Would like to know more in terms of kind of the CIC and the setup and involvement. Obviously, as a charity and company limited by guarantee, we've got a quite different. So we just need to work that more and understand it better.
Should I just say something about that for a second? So essentially, membership won't have any impact on you as a charity in the sense that the two are completely separate. It's just about people becoming, there's a potential for people who are part of the, if there were, say there were 30 organizations that were members, not all of them can have board membership. That would be a far too great a number. So you're probably looking at something like, I don't know, consistently having 5 or 6 people attending, so that it makes for a strongish board. So it's more about the membership having an idea about who they think should be representing them, really.
Yes. We also have on our board of trustees, we have someone who works at UWE. That's another kind of connection that I'm seeing. So I'll discuss that with her as well.
It's a big oversight on my part not putting the universities on there. How silly of me. They're definitely in my head, they just weren't on paper or on the screen. Great. Sorry, Donna. Does that make things clearer?
Yeah, no, that's useful. Thank you. So just.
And where are you from, Donna?
Sorry, no, including me. So I'm Donna Liggins. So I'm Bristol City Council. I'm the head of the emergency prepare. We just literally changed our name. Emergency Preparedness, Risk Resilience and Continuity Manager. So
yes, long title.
Yeah, but it covers all the tins. But it's basically around preparing for the civil and national type emergencies. So those things that are deemed critical and major, above and beyond what a single agency is able to respond to within their normal business as usual, business continuity, etc. So I do find this very interesting, and I really don't want to come across negative. I just think there needs to be some sort of rejigging on direction, because a lot of the elements you've described in the disruption and recovery phase, we've already got plans, structures, agencies and elements for, and there's already lots of conversations going on about, if we have this apocalyptic power outage, you know, where do we need our strategic hubs to be that we can get comms to, and start building that network of the mothership down into the communities. So those conversations are already taking place, and it does come down to, where can we get point-to-point radio contact and think, you know, so there's going to be very, very limited resources in those types of scenarios.
Yes.
So I think there's an element here about managing expectations of what we would actually do in some of these scenarios.
When you say that, at what point does these do that? Because this is about when it kicks in, really. Because are you talking about days and weeks, or are you talking about?
So again, I think that's something else we need to unpick. There are so many different layers and so many different scenarios over time, over what time of year it is, what the incident is, and what people think resilience is as well. So, you know, the worst case scenario that we have no power for more than 3 days, let's say, we are already having conversations about, okay, where are our pre-identified strategic sites where we could get comms to, where we would have generators, where we could fuel those generators, because that's the other thing. There will be a hierarchy of who gets what resource. And I'm afraid to say the community aspect beyond establishing our command and control is quite a bit way down the list.
And that is exactly right.
Yeah, and that's not to say that we don't care and we think that's where they should be, because the other aspect of this for me is how we make our individual citizens resilient, because I don't actually want people evacuating from their properties during a power outage.
No.
So I know that a lot of people will gravitate to, the lights are on over there, I'm going to go over there and see what the deal is. They might have information, they might be able to help me out with something, this, that and the other. I know there's going to be a plethora of things around individual needs, be it medically, be it you know, culturally, etc. So there are so many of these conversations happening. So I think for me, going right back to the basics of, yes, we've got 200 plus community places of safety. How do I ensure that they're resilient? You know, what's their business continuity? Do they have a generator already? Have they got a plan on how they're going to fuel that generator? You know, we've got
probably not.
Well, probably not. But again, is it proportionate for them to do that? No. Because again, I wouldn't be asking all 200 to open up during a power outage. So again, it's about what's their risk appetite, what's already within their gift from their business continuity and how they maintain their critical services in that everyday situation. And then actually, what do I need when it comes into that emergency response from them? And essentially it's someone to open the door and to give me access to the building. First and foremost, shelter. All of the feeding, all of the comms and the welfare support and stuff like that, I can to some degree bring in. But yes, I'd absolutely love that support to be from the community first. And that's essentially what we've had during some of our significant fires before Christmas. You know, I couldn't get any voluntary agencies, well, very few voluntary agencies could support me with emergency feeding. But the local cafe down the road, amazing job, delivered hot meals, culturally sensitive. It was fantastic. And that's what I'd like more of, that community resilience. So that if and when I activate these things, I know I can call them and say, do you know what, guys, I'm going to be here for the day, the night. Can you open up the shop? Can you do this? So there are already things in place. We've got agreements with Tesco's for emergency feeding, and I could do a full section on all of this. But for me, if we were coming back to the basics of how you make your settings, your centres and things more resilient, let's go back to, what do we need to maintain this building? You know,
Yes.
what are the critical activities? What are the critical elements to be able to open the door? So we've got St Werburgh's Community Centre on our places of safety. I know who to contact if I need to open it up. You know, I think we've got near enough most of the centres. I need to double check on our list. And again, depending on the nature of the incident, depending on the locality, to the cordon, to the risk, the number of people that we're evacuating, all factors into which centre I ring and activate. So,
I think there is, I think if you know, like if you, like to say, there's a fire, there's a gas leak or a bomb threat or something that's fairly localized.
Yeah.
All of that works really well. And even to an extent, maybe some localized flooding or something, you know, something that works well. I think where we want to be adding resilience with this is to reduce the reliance on the work you are carrying out, because you'll be so busy if something big happens that the neighborhoods, the people, they need to have awareness, they need to understand, people need to understand what's there already before it happens. You know, they need to have a there's
already lots of the kind of channels about warning and informing, about how we would stand up our response with our not just partner agencies, but the services within our team. We've got a whole incident management structure. We've got all of our capabilities from which service would be able to do what, and this, that, and the other. So all of that comms down into communities. We've got that chain established.
Is that really new, or is that historic?
No, it's historic. Yeah. Again,
but
it's just practicing the delivery, but also what perhaps needs more practice is comms up the chain. So community saying, this is what we're struggling with, or actually can, you know, feed it back up the chain. Again, we'll find resources and come back. Sorry, am I breaking up a bit?
You were for a second, but you're back now, I think.
Yeah, so again, I don't want to come across negative and like this is all good stuff, because it's great stuff. I just think we need to understand who's already got what roles and responsibilities and is already doing what and has what assets and capabilities, and then find the niche for what is or missing, or what you can add to what's already being put in place. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think you have, in a way, from my perspective, I don't know what you other people on the call think, but I think you are making an excellent point why we need a resilience network. because it's, so my experience, so I can base this on my experience of, obviously, you know, the recent 3 years, but before COVID in particular, I knew as the person who was in charge of Eastern Community Centre that we were on this list, but I found out about it accidentally. I found out about it accidentally. Inside the centre itself, there was no structure of communication at that time. And I think this may have slightly changed with COVID, and with the warm hubs, that there's a higher level of awareness of being ready, which is sort of what we're tapping into. But at that time, certainly, even if the council and, you know, the NHS and every other emergency service was working together to have all these plans, it wasn't there was like a gap, and that's the gap we want to fill. We want to be the link between the communities and the statutory parts and the other parts that are working to develop all sorts of plans as well, but also in line with, specifically in line with the investments into buildings that are to do with carbon reduction measures. because there are opportunities there to build strength and resilience into those systems.
100% agree. Again, it's how do we build on what we're already doing. So, for example, we've spent a lot of time with our community neighbourhood and development teams, because exactly that, I want to know. And we've done a lot of mapping around where our risks are, where our assets are within Bristol. We're going out to ward members, to get their level of intelligence about their wards, because, for example, one of the pilots, we didn't realise there was actually a massive car park hidden away somewhere, and I was like, great, that could be a strategic holding site. If we need to bring the military in, or if we need to bring in national assets for the fire service, we've actually got an extra car. So those things happen and take place. But the next point that I want to get to with our community neighbourhood and development team is they themselves don't necessarily know that they've got a community place of safety on their doorstep. So I've got this lovely contact list that I wake people up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and every 6 months we go out to all community places and safety and say, are these contact details still the same? Are you still the key holder? Are you still willing to be a place of safety, etc., etc.? But then it's yes, educating the local communities, and it's educating the teams and the resources that I need within a centre when it opens. The concern and the danger is that in some scenarios, what might be the closest places of safety to the incident isn't the one that I'm going to open up and use.
That's fine, but that doesn't stop a centre from opening up.
No, but I would. I'd be very, I don't want to use the word concern, because I don't want to stop grassroots level community movements at all. But then we've got either parallel things going on, or I've got double the resourcing needs that I can actually manage.
No, I get that. And what we need to avoid is it needs to be going both ways. So we need to avoid with this to put more strain on your team, at the same time as avoiding to put more strain on anything to do with the actual community centres. So this is meant to be helpful, not putting additional strain on. So I think the way to look at it is that, firstly, it depends, like you said, on the specific scenario. So the worst case scenarios are probably not what we're looking at.
Yeah.
We're looking at temporary disruption that is significant enough to make it very useful to have, I don't know, battery storage as opposed to a diesel generator, to temporarily get through a power cut, to have a resilient way of refueling that battery.
But again, in the first and foremost, I would again be proportionate against the risk and the likelihood. I would strongly suggest you look at that from your own site's business continuity and critical services first.
Yes.
And then if you have that capability,
yes,
then you are likely to then be able to react better to that disruption.
Yeah.
But the likelihood is that anything that kind of falls within that category of disruption, critical, major, it will be emergency response stuff anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the neighborhoods, people will still want to be able to, but people still want to be able to have reassurance before things happen. So if you know that certain things are likely, I think that's where COVID has been quite a helpful way of getting people to look forward in different ways. So I think people are going to be more responsive to looking at what might be happening in their area if something goes wrong than they were before COVID.
I sincerely hope so, and I would like to think that. I think what we're describing here is the no notice impacts.
Yeah.
and the rising tide impact of where we know there's a bit of bad weather coming, or we know there's another variant coming, or we know we're going to have a planned outage tomorrow. How can we warn and inform our communities? How can we ensure that they've not checked on their neighbours, or they've received the latest piece of information, etc., etc. I would love to be able to have more kind of community sessions about how they can be prepared. And say things like, do you know what to put in a grab bag if you suddenly find yourself needing to be evacuated and you've only got 5 minutes to chuck stuff together, put in that bag? Because a lot of the secondary issues that we have during disruption is down to people are not prepared. We're out of sync with where we were 50 years ago. You knew to grab your medication, you knew to grab your phone book, and you know, all those kind of things. We've got communities that don't even know to ring 999. So going right back to the basics on how we educate our communities in these hubs is probably more beneficial in preparing them mentally, locally, for if and when those disruptions do happen.
I think the biggest problem that you were referring to earlier is what happens when the internet goes down, when your phones don't work.
I can't wait for the time off, if I'm honest, but I will not be having time off in that scenario, I can tell you now.
Anyway, so what do other people think about this conversation that we just had? Is it scary? Is it annoying to have this conversation? Is it confusing? Is it the conversation have? Do you still think it's worth having this network? Because I think it is, but obviously, you know, I wasn't going to be swayed away from it now.
Iris, I really think the idea has value, and I think a lot of the value, you know, those of us that work in community organisations are really aware of the value of that they bring in terms of, I mean, we saw from the pandemic areas that were underserved by the kind of social infrastructure we provide did worse, needed more hand-holding, needed more direct assistance from the council. It's a huge resource that we kind of steward. We're mostly in you know, slightly crumbly buildings, and I think, you know, that's a really good opportunity to link the two things together. But I think the most important thing we can bring is, you know, in a scenario like that, it's really important that people feel not that emergency response is being done to them, but that they have some control, are empowered. It will reduce panic. It will shorten the kind of, you know, and reduce the kind of emergency response needed if people have had, you know, we talk about asset-based community development, don't we? It's that basically. It's bringing people in so that they can feed into, understand, and have a hand in developing those plans. And I think that's where community organisations that are place-based, like most of us, have really something really valuable to offer, and fits in exactly with the kind of work we already do, which is sort of being that, you know, that third party that links people who may find it hard to build social capital amongst themselves. You know, that's another thing that's kind of really clearly borne out in homogenous and more wealthy areas. People have direct social capital with one another. In rural areas, or in better off areas where everybody, you know, similar faces. In more diverse areas, that third party, the community centre or whatever it is, can replicate that, you know, that trust. Yeah, that social capital, that you know, that's what community anchors do. So for me, it feels very important, and especially in the light of the pandemic. You know, people, I had a note through my door saying, can you shop for so-and-so, or do you need anything? Somebody I've never met before that was ready to go, you know, and with, you know, before before any other communication had come to me, some local person had taken it upon themselves to swing into action, and that's absolutely, yeah, unquantifiably valuable, I think. So yeah,
Wow.
I'm still keen.
Right.
Short.
Anyone else? Oh, David, did you want to throw in a couple of things here that are the other side of things while
Okay.
we're at it?
Okay, I'm really happy to do that. This is, I'm going to share a screen and show just how incredibly coordinated we are, because I nicked a slide from Iris and was able to copy her theme. But what I've actually got is a bit of a whip through community energy and how hubs could help communities become more resilient and vice versa. So this is pretty quick fly past, and that is not the wind turbine that Lawrence Western are building in Avonmouth. It's much bigger what they're building. That's just the foundation, which is like huge. And that was in December.
It is the biggest onshore turbine being built ever thus far.
Yeah, far and away the biggest. Wonderful. An incredible piece of work, and it came from lottery funding and Ambition Lawrence Western getting 10 years of 100 grand from Big Local, enabling them to build resource. And they finally said, well, they never finally, they're always working on this, the idea that what they wanted to do was to make that seed funding, that was grant funding, into something resilient. So they had much stronger community hub. And I just want, can you see all of that? Yeah. The numbers, it's a 4 megawatt wind turbine, which is the biggest on land. You can now get up to 7, and they've got funding to help some other communities, 10 more communities get wind turbines. And they're already saying, yeah, we want them to be 7 megawatt turbines. So this seed piece is going further. It's going to cost about 5.5 million. The wind blows in effect 100%, 3,000 hours a year. So 4 megawatts gets you 12,000 megawatt hours of electricity, which you would sell wholesale to the grid at about 4 pence a unit. That brings in 480,000 a year. And you can see, well, obviously that's going to be able to pay off 5.5 million in 20, 30 years and provide a comfortable surplus to the community, except along came an energy crisis, and they're now in the very real probability that they're going to get a multiple of that as income from their turbine. And if they can make the energy crisis string out long enough, they'll have their turbine paid for in 2 or 3 years. Now, not everybody, other communities haven't got sites that are suitable for wind energy, obviously. But when I started talking with Iris, I was saying, well, you know, this is going to be an extra cost for community centres. That in itself either relies on grant funding or some kind of fundraising. Might there be a way that we can do this sustainably? And so the upside from this with Lawrence Western is there's going to be surpluses to the community. The downside is that electricity is going straight into the grid. It's not providing cheaper energy for consumers in Lawrence Western yet, although there's some possibility that can be added in later. So solar, we've got roofs everywhere. And Bristol Energy Co-op has already been active, and it's already got it's already planning a 1 megawatt, or got a 1 megawatt array on a roof. I was involved in this sometime. I put the first solar roof on Hamilton House. At the time, it was the biggest in Bristol because we beat George Ferguson's array on the tobacco factory. We were a little bit bigger. But if you look at the streets, there's far more solar around. And so we, a couple of years back, we developed this idea for Lockleys Love Solar, where the idea was to put a solar array on the roofs of the houses and to share the electricity. And this would be community funded. So you'd have solar panels on your roof that you didn't pay for, and you get cheaper energy from it. We had a whole plan for this. We had marketing materials, and then along came COVID, And the project relied on having a partnership with an energy company. And we had chosen and been advised to choose Bristol Energy Company, and then the council sold it off, and that left us in the lurch. And
it went bust.
Yeah, it went well. It became not viable, and it was sold off. The council did get some cash for it. So it didn't collapse into bankruptcy quite now. Anyway, there were two problems that made the project not as viable as we would have liked. In fact, three. One was, if you use the solar coming from your roof, you might be paying us 10 pence a unit for it. If you don't use it, it's sold to an energy company on an export tariff, which might be less. So you've got two different income streams, and you're not quite sure how that's going to balance. And the numbers became marginal because of that. And the other one was, as soon as you want to share electricity with your neighbors, you get involved in grid charges. And those grid charges can make the electricity as expensive as regular electricity. So the numbers were marginal. It was a great idea. We were kind of happy in some ways to withdraw it and say, there'll come a time when we can come back to this idea. And I think that's a possibility. Sorry, I meant to just say this. This is new from last week. Good Energy is saying the export electricity that you sell will give you 10 pence a unit for it. So if we were charging people 10 pence a unit for the electricity they use from their roof, and what they don't use, we get 10 pence for anyway, we've got a guaranteed stable income stream. And I'll show you the numbers stacking up in a moment. The other one that came up last week as well is Octopus Energy are saying, if you have a business with more than one site, some of which is generating and some of which is using, will allow you to let the remote sites use the electricity being generated centrally, and we won't charge you for energy transmission. We'll give you a netted bill. So basically you get kind of free transmission around your town. So I'm immediately saying, oh, right, well, let's take all the homes in Bristol that have got solar on and all the homes that haven't, and have zero transmission charges between the homes. This might be done on a neighborhood basis, but it means that you have got the possibility for a shared energy model with lower network charges. So it works better for the community.
Although we are not sure they mean that, and they might not agree with that interpretation.
We know for sure that the government don't want communities to have what they call all their energy behind the meter. But we are working towards that, and we're possibly working towards a new government. And just to show, we may or may not be. I don't want to say anything political. What we have in the One City Climate Strategy, in the evidence base put together by CSE, is an aspiration to have solar on half the suitable roofs in the city. So it's 96,000 roofs, of which 80,000 would be domestic installations. And they think that's over 500 megawatts, and that it would cost over 600 million. Well, when we were working on the Lockleys Love Solar project, we were able to get better prices than that, right? I think we can get at least a third off, and maybe by the time you've built all of this out, costs will have come down further, and your average price may be as little as half that. So you have the solar numbers look like this. So we're talking about roughly 500 megawatts shared between all the community centres, an investment of 300 or 400 million, generating 475 gigawatt hours a year, bringing in an income at 10 pence a unit of 47.5 million-ish. These are really rough numbers, but you can see 47 million pays off the cost of the energy quite comfortably over 20 years, and there would be surpluses in this. So, and if people had been paying up until now 16 pence a unit for their electricity, then they will get some of their electricity at 10 pence a unit, and you would have savings in the community of 28 million a year. far more than that now that we're in an energy crisis with much higher energy prices. So we're looking at a good justification for putting solar on roofs, and the possibility, if this is done in partnership with resilient hubs, the resilient hubs can be the base from which this is planned and built out in the community. They can be the one-stop shops that the Citizens Assembly was calling for, where people can go to for advice, and they can help create whole street examples of streets that are more resilient, that have got solar. And solar on roofs is just the start, obviously. There's other discussions about retrofits. There's what you do with batteries and so on. I just wanted to grab a few minutes to give an outline. This is not the plan. This is the idea to work towards a plan, and a little bit of input that says, if you're thinking, what's all this going to cost and how are we going to do it? Then there's possibility to flip that into what investment can that attract and how can we benefit from it? And if you're talking, say, about putting solar on 5,000 houses, which from my numbers might cost about 10 million, 500,000 of that could be for upgrades in the community centre. You could build in capital in the solar rooftop plan that was going to upgrade hubs as well. So I just wanted to drop that in. Is that good enough, Iris?
It's great. Now, I did say to you, I said, yeah, so I would look at 10, even if you just look at 10% of the last slide, that's still, you know, that's the 50% of all the roofs in Bristol that are suitable for solar. But if you then even just take 10% of that, that would still be a significant amount of both savings within the community, because the difference is that the money that's being generated stays in Bristol, and it doesn't go to some investor,
right,
in some other,
and it shifts,
and somebody else's swimming pool isn't being heated by it, put it this way.
There's another implication of Octopus's model is that it has to be an enterprise with a single kind of point of billing, and that means you would want to be forming a community co-op that people are members of. And this has already been done in Wales with a project working with Octopus by Energy Local, and everybody joins. In their case, they've got 100 members of the community are in an energy club with a hydropower scheme, and the electricity is shared between the power scheme and the people. But this is building a different kind of resilience. It's not about disaster recovery so much as building communities. You know, the communities that get the short end of the stick are the ones that are poor. And if you can create communities that are thriving with strong local economies, that is the biggest, to my mind, the biggest thing you can do for creating resilience. But if it's in partnership with a good plan to have hubs be really places where they're able to serve their community at a time of need, then fantastic. So Donna, I see community energy dovetailing with the emergency planning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where I would feel more comfortable in trying to break some of this down, because what you're describing there is long-term resilience.
Yes.
And a lot of my work, I'm bounded by the short-term reactive resilience. And I literally had a conversation within the organisation on Monday where it was about heat waves and high temperatures, actually, where I was saying to all of my heads of service and my business continuity owners, and basically saying, this is the risk, this is the likelihood, this is what we need to be prepared for in the coming summers, and in 10, 20, 50 years time, it's going to progressively get worse and more intense and more likely.
Yeah.
And the question to those services is, how do you mitigate, or how do you start to think about building in resilience now to your critical services? You know, what adaptations are you going to need? How are you going to need to flex your workforce, for example? What's the impacts going to be to the communities? What's the health information, warning, informing information, etc., etc. So I've literally had that conversation on Monday because what I want to start doing is getting the people to think about the medium and the long-term resilience, exactly what you've just been describing with the solar panels and the wind turbines, etc., etc. I'm totally all for it. Oh, there was another point then I was going to say, it's escaping my mind. The difficulty we sometimes have is we're always on an annual budget cycle. We're always on a 3 or 4 political cycle. And to get people to, you know, and I think people know that in 10 to 50 years time, you know, things are going to be different, things are going to be worse, things are going to be better if we do this, if we do that. But having the research to evidence the rationale for the spend, the investment, the change in infrastructure, etc., is really, really hard sometimes to project. And yeah, so that's where I tend to constantly be stuck in this 2-3 year reactive resilience cycle, because I don't have any money as a service. You know, I'm an emergency responder. I'm not a community development team. I'm not a sustainability team. I don't have my own service area budget where I can shape and invest my projects to our corporate strategies. But that's why I'm taking the shift and the change to all of our services and saying, but you do. And I'm sharing this risk information with you because you need to know it's coming, and you need to build it into your projects, into your strategies, etc., etc. So that is literally a shift that we're trialing. Kickstarted it off on Monday to try and have those conversations in a more broader, wider sharing, preparedness way. So I think if we can get some of the long-term resilience in, then yes, absolutely, we will be a stronger, better city for it. But
the long-term resilience will most likely pay off in emergency situations.
Oh, absolutely. Well. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where the two conjoin. So when buildings are being made ready for the future, because we are wanting to reduce the carbon footprint of buildings, communities, neighborhoods, individuals, whatever you want to define, at that point, there will be lots of opportunity to build resilience within that. There's also lots of opportunity not to do that, because you can achieve many things without resilience being, it might be an outcome that's accidental, but there's going to be much better resilience if it has a place within the planning. And I think that's where we see ourselves being, to ensure that at the point of investment, at this point, from now going forward, for all those buildings, all those neighborhoods, all those planning things that are happening, that resilience is always somewhere visible, and we want to make it visible, and we want to keep it visible, so that it doesn't get not ignored isn't the right word, but it's just really difficult to keep it in focus when you're trying to reduce your carbon footprint, and that in itself already is such a major undertaking.
It is. I mean, some of the examples I use to describe how we've already built resilience, and you know, the education we've done on fire alarms in homes, for example, and getting those installed means we now have less fires, and actually fire and rescue services do more rescuing than they do firefighting. It's the same with the advance on technology with our vehicles. You know, there's much more safety measures, and you know, so the impact of collisions and stuff like that is different. Within Bristol itself, because of the mitigations and the flood defences that have been designed into infrastructure, because we know what our flood risks are and our flood maps are and so forth, I'm now actually in a position where I've got a flood barrier, but I've actually got very little to nowhere that I can deploy it during a flood where it's actually going to make a damn bit of difference, because all of the flood defences that have been built in are doing their job. So it's almost like, again, we've built resilience into the city so that actually the impact on the response and recovery is much more reduced. So there are examples out there of what we're already doing. I think what we need to be looking at is horizon scanning, and people sometimes sort of not snigger, but you know, look at what's happening in Europe, look at what's happening in Australia, because we all saw how horrific California and Australia's wildfires were. Oh, it won't happen here. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Well, it did happen. London had
yeah. So
what, 5
you know,
houses burned down? 5 houses, was it?
We had wildfires in Bristol last year, you know, so again, we learn from that and we build it into our mitigations and response plans and so forth. But yes, we do need to be more aware of what is happening globally, you know, even the geopolitical stuff, you know, how that's impacted things as well, because those are going to be your medium and long-term things to prepare for.
Yes, and just to make a point about the poorer neighborhoods versus more wealthy neighborhoods, the sort of resilience on a basic level, I don't know if people are sort of familiar with prepping, but the American term, but when you have money, you can buy a big battery and stick it in your basement when you need it. You can, you know, you can have all sorts of gadgetry that you can just buy and have just in case. And you can have your expensive bug-out bags that just sit there because you have the space, you have the resources, you have whatever there. Whereas if you are not in those neighborhoods, that makes it a lot more complicated, and your reliance on outside help was much, much greater. And that will continue to be the case and probably go up, that reliance rather than down. I really wish I could be very positive and say everything, you know, because we are trying to move into the right way of doing things. But I think that if we can protect people from impact of those things more in the medium and long term. So this is why this is now is a good time to start this, to get in there while all these changes are being made to buildings physically, while all the investment is being done into community energy and retrofitting, which will also benefit the summers, like you just said. So that has all sorts of impact that's positive and involving people and involving co-designing of services, plans, people understanding their role when something doesn't go right. So
I'm just going to put some links in the chat. So yeah, absolutely. We know that our most deprived areas are the ones that will need assistance the most during an emergency. But once you've given that initial area of shelter or that initial need, they do pull together really, really well and really strongly, because they've got the community champions and community networks, etc., etc., and it's tapping into those. The pinpoint chat that I've just put in there, that is a public accessible website, and you can drill down on the menus on the left hand side and click the buttons to show the icons up on the map, and you'll be able to see where all the community places of safety are within Bristol. And for those that know Bristol well enough, you'll see that I've got gaps in some of our deprived areas. So there are places where I would like to have more community place of safety. So there's something there. And then the other thing we've got 2 other maps, again, publicly accessible. Is this link going to work best for you guys? Do you all know about the Heat Vulnerability Index, the Keeping Bristol Cool strategy framework?
I haven't looked at it, but I do know about the initiative.
Okay, so again, publicly accessible map, where you can go in, and again, you can put all different parameters on by age, demographics, etc., etc., but it literally shows you the hotspots in Bristol. So we know, being a city, we're going to retain heat overnight as well, but we also know, because of the nature of the buildings, the nature of parks and open spaces and waterfronts where it does naturally cool down a bit, because of the
so where we're sitting in the bowls and the valleys, basically.
So all the kind of geography, the age related factors, the exposure factors and stuff, and climate mapping and stuff like that's been done. So we can already see where our worst or our hottest areas of the city are going to be during a heat wave and high temperatures. So again, channeling resources, energy, what resilience do we need in this risk category, and where, I would say please use these tools. There is a health map as well. I'll need to find the link, but again, takes into account deprivation, access to a GP. You know, if there's areas that haven't got a health facility within walking distance or accessible, you know, it's marked down because people are having to travel, they can't access health services and stuff like that. So all of those factors have also been put into a health indicator map as well. You won't be surprised, but where you've got the darker colorings on the heat vulnerability, you've got the dark colorings on the health and things as well. So everything does kind of go hand in hand. But they utilize those resources as well.
Okay. I'm presuming because they're the most inner city, most densely populated, most concrete, most least green spaces.
Yeah, I mean, you know, right in the centre, you've got Lawrence Hill, Easton, Southville, etc., Southmead as well. Frome Vale, and again, some of those, you know, areas, a lot of the properties are south facing, so that, you know, and all of those factors have been put in.
It's great for solar, not so great when you have a heat wave.
Well, yeah, you know, and of course 1970s, we all wanted those big lovely windows, you know, and that now, you know, just pour the heat in or let all the cold out. So lots of different ways to think about it.
We need to wrap it up. So thank you. Thanks for that, Donna. That's really helpful.
That's right.
I will be in touch with everybody to summarize what we have learned. Any final comments from anyone?
Just that it was really very interesting, and I can see that there's going to be more dialogue. And
yes, so we will find our place. I think we will press ahead with making this happen and make sure that we work in partnership to support certainly what Donna's doing. There's no point doing anything that is undermining anything in any way. It should be complementary and it should work together. And it will take some negotiation, maybe sometimes on both sides, but in general, it's no point doing anything that undermines anything that you're doing, certainly. So just wanted to reassure that. Okay. Are you all right? Thank you very much. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Iris.
Thanks,
Thanks
everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.